Hello and welcome to Cut and Splice. This is Gil,
And Matt,
And this is Jason.
and this time around we're going to be talking about the Batman. This came up pretty recently, depending on when this gets posted, but probably be for a while. I saw it after a little bit, like once it came out on streaming, and I thought it was worth a discussion because Matt saw it first, I believe, and I think your response, Matt, that you really liked it, and Jason also saw it, I believe, liked it as well, and maybe not as enthusiastically as Matt, and then I watched it and I felt like between that scene where everybody falls and the obvious comparison that people were making to The Dark Knight, and then we also discussed it briefly with the length episode talking about
Oh yeah.
runtimes. That I felt like it might be worthy of a discussion between all those things, apart from just the movie itself. I think all those things maybe hashing out would be interesting. So yeah, maybe we can start there. We can do like a quick review and recommendation before getting to spoilers and stuff. Where did it fall for you guys as far as the obvious comparison? Because a lot of people were saying like, oh, it might possibly be better than The Dark Knight. Did either of you feel that it got close, as much as you can compare two very different movies?
Well, they're not that different.
I mean, pretty
well,
different.
well,
But
I mean, one of them's not like Ben-Hur, and then the other one's like Toy Story or something. It's like
yeah,
they're both Batman movies.
yeah, it's not A Bug's Life and Seven Samurai, which are the
yeah,
same plot,
Those
but
are much more
yeah,
comparable. Those
yeah,
are much more comparable.
but still, a lot of those movies are closer than like the Adam West, Burt Ward, like shark repellent Batman movie, and
Love that movie.
the Dark Knight and everything. So I did make a comparison right off the bat between that was not intended. The bat.
That's
Uh,
fun.
uh,
uh, the Batman and the Dark Knight, and I made it privately between you guys because, and I'm happy that I did because I actually went into this in retrospect and said it's not really a fair way to judge the movie. I mean, okay, which movie do you prefer, Batman Begins or Mask of the Phantasm? I mean, they're
Mask of
both
the Phantasm.
yeah, they're both really fucking good, but they're
Yeah,
also really really different
yeah.
in a lot of ways. I think that I was wrong to immediately try to make a comparison between the Batman and the Dark Knight just because I mean again, first of all, we can have the question about which is better, the Mask of the Phantasm or Batman Begins. They all exist in the same universe. I mean, yes, I'm on the side of Mask of the Phantasm, as I believe Jason is, um, but they're both really good movies and really hard to uh, directly compare. But when it comes to the Batman and the Dark Knight, I think that what we're really talking about is like Christopher Nolan very deliberately said that Michael Mann's film Heat was a major influence for his film The Dark Knight, whereas it's just generally known that David Fincher's film Seven was a major influencer for the Batman. And those are really different movies in a lot of ways, and the influences are both they both permeate those two Batman movies, and it's really clear, and they are not the same thing. You can't just put them together and say, well, I mean, honestly, like I can say that I liked the Batmobile in the Batman better than I liked the Batmobile in the Christopher Nolan series. I can just say that personally. I really enjoyed that touch the decisions that they made for the Batmobile in the Batman, that was just sexy filmmaking. It looked like a bat out of hell.
I didn't know that about the Dark Knight. That is interesting. I mean, I guess that's an obvious comparison. Has that been documented that he was drawing on that, or it's just your assumption?
To my knowledge, he's actually acknowledged inspiration from Heat. I don't have it right in front of me, but I mean, the comparisons are undeniable.
Yeah.
I mean, just like with the Batman, I mean, everybody's been talking about comparisons between Seven and the Batman.
I
So
didn't make that connection either. I mean, it's like when you
I
say
kind
it,
of feel like it's more like Saw.
more like so. Yeah, I would say somewhere in
yeah,
between
in a way,
the two.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Not that Saw is so far removed from Seven.
Yeah, no, I'm on the fence about all these comparisons because to me, I mean, Nolan for one thing is definitely his own filmmaker, especially by the time he got to The Dark Knight. So I felt like it was just a very Nolan movie.
Mhm.
But yeah, obviously everybody draws from everything they see, so including real
Right.
life.
I think, Matt, what essentially you were saying is that while obviously the movies are comparable, that they were trying to achieve two very different things, and they were largely being inspired by two different feels and two different other movies and so on and so forth.
Right.
And therefore they can both be very successful at what they're doing without being the same thing.
Yeah, and also a praise of one movie is not a diss on another, and vice versa. You know, like I think The Dark Knight and the Batman are both really great movies, and they're going to live for a very long time, being regarded as a couple of the best in the franchise.
That's high praise. What about you, Jason?
Well, for one thing, I think that we were all totally right, and that the movie absolutely needed an intermission.
Yes, and also possibly some cutting. Like it could have been shorter.
Yeah.
This is my opinion, but an intermission for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I liked it a lot more than I thought I would. I really liked the movie. I thought Robert Pattinson was pretty good. Different for sure, going for a real different kind of Batman. I definitely have some issues with it, and some of it's just kind of fan related problems. Other ones are kind of more like along the lines of just weird choices and stuff like that. But overall, I definitely liked it. I don't think that as a movie or as a Batman movie that it's nearly as good as The Dark Knight. I would say that it's somewhere between the 1989 Tim Burton Batman movie, like as in probably a little bit better than that, and maybe not quite as good as Batman Begins, kind of somewhere in that range, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's your ranking pretty much. What would you put fifth place?
Say what now?
What would be your fifth? Like if those are like the four.
Well, if
Or
we're
sorry,
only talking about live
sorry,
action
three.
Batman movies,
Oh, four. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
no, that was four. I mentioned four different ones. If we were just talking about live action Batman movies and nothing else, probably we're just talking about feature film. No, all right. I don't know. I'm not sure. The rest are pretty much significantly lower. It depends on how I'm feeling that day. If I'm being particularly nice to my nostalgic feelings of seeing Batman Forever in theaters as the first Batman movie I ever saw, or if I am acknowledging the horrendous problems with that movie and then just overlooking all the problems with The Dark Knight Rises, I guess. I don't know. It's a long answer. Sorry.
Yeah, it's true. Also, Batman Returns is not a terrible movie, but it's they're all very flawed. Like all the rest of them are just
Yeah,
flawed.
very fun.
And then
I know many people who love Batman Returns. I mean, just love it to death.
Yeah, I
I
like
think
Danny DeVito and Michelle Pfeiffer. I think they're
I
good
think really
choices
good
for those
casting,
characters.
for sure, for sure. I think that I think all the casting in that movie is very good, actually. I feel like there's something really magical about the first Batman, the 1989 Batman. Um,
Mhm.
and while it's great to see Keaton reprising the role, something doesn't work for me. A lot of stuff doesn't work for me with that second one. But I don't know. Yeah, they're all flawed after those four.
Now,
Yeah.
Gil, you're the only one who hasn't given an overall impression of the movie. So,
Yeah, so my take on it is it was interesting because I always nowadays I see movies in multiple sittings, and it took me like three of them
mhm.
for this one, or it might have been two, but in any case, but the first sitting, the first hour or so, I was like, you know what, this is like absorbing stuff. Like I kind of get it. It's good stuff. It's not
Mhm.
Chinatown good, but like it's a good detective story.
Mhm.
I like the dynamic between like they really nailed the dynamic between Gordon and Batman and all that. Like I like
Yeah.
that stuff. Some things bothered me about the style of it, the way it was shot and the cinematography and stuff. I just felt like it was too dark. It was the whole thing of like we never show daylight. Basically, everything happens at night until there's like one scene when it's like during the day. So it's a bit too dark. Like the police investigation of a murder, and it's like pitch black in the room. Come on, like there's gonna be a lot of light in that room if they're like getting fingerprints, taking photos. But that's a side note. Like I felt like they just went too hardcore on the style. But it was absorbing. But then by the second sitting, I don't know if it went to a third sitting, I did feel like, wow, if I was watching this not episodically with multiple sittings, this would feel very long. Like this, by the end of it, by the midway point, I felt like it was a bit lagging. It's a bit too many characters, but not pulling them off as successfully as The Dark Knight did.
Mhm.
There wasn't as much of a forward momentum. It's funny you say Seven. I'm not a big fan of Seven. It's a decent movie, but I feel like of all of Fincher's movies, it's got a forward momentum issue. It's a bit slow, and now it makes sense that this drew on it. It's a bit of a slow burner, and yeah, there's action scenes here and there, but story wise, there's not a very strong forward momentum. And then with spoilers later on, we'll get into the specifics there, like plot wise. So yeah, by the end of it, I was kind of deflated a bit. I said like, it's a solid movie. It's definitely probably top four. Like if I had to rank them, it's probably be the Dark Knight. I would be on the fence. I have a really warm place in my heart for the first Batman. I might actually put it second, and because I just think it's solid for what it was supposed to be, and didn't get too kooky
Mhm.
like the second one. Um,
I don't think anybody would fault you for that.
Yeah.
yeah, and I mean the first one was supposed to be kooky because it was the Joker, but then the second one just went a bit too far, and yeah, and then this one, not a bad movie. It's just that it's not the best one, and yeah, and then I'm on the fence. I'm not a big Batman Begins fan. It's probably the next one up, and maybe the fifth one. I guess will be a toss up between yeah, the Val Kilmer. What was that? The Forever.
Batman Forever. Yeah.
Batman Forever. A toss up between that one and Batman Returns. Maybe someday I'll visit The Dark Knight Rises and see if it's not as bad as we all think it is. But yeah, that would be my rankings, and I really think, just to finish my argument about that, is that there's no comparison. I think The Dark Knight is a way better movie. The forward momentum, the even though it's flawed with some of his own plot devices and stuff, I think thematically, um, pacing wise, and just
Mhm.
in film history. Like I really think that this movie is not gonna have the same place that The Dark Knight has. The Dark Knight has it's in that echelon of like T2, these action movies that really just stand apart. Like they really like jump out of their genres to be much more than just an action movie. That they just show what is possible to be done with an action movie if it's in the right hands. And then I think some of those movies I mentioned, like T2 and Dark Knight, there's a few others, not many of them, but I don't think this is one of them. I think it's a solid, like, neo-noir type of Batman movie. It's not bad in any way, like all the campy ones, but by no means like close to perfect.
Okay, so I'm still going to put The Dark Knight number one. That's really hard to not do. I mean, there are major plot problems with The Dark Knight and everything like that, but nothing changes the fact that, they dealt with serious philosophical issues. They dealt with, I mean, we had Heath Ledger like knocking everybody's fucking socks off in that movie. Just startlingly ambitious and well-produced visuals. There's just no way to get around it. That was just a masterpiece of action filmmaking. Right now, I would put the Batman at number 2 for me. And we'll get into this a little bit more probably, but I think that there are some actually subtleties, like some philosophical subtleties that a lot of people are missing because of like one line in particular that I'm pretty sure the studio required that they write in there. But I think that there are actually some bigger ideas that are actually a little bit more internal and personal in the Batman than we got with any of the other films. Movies, because the Batman was shot digitally. I'm also knocking it down a few points because it was shot digitally. Number 3, I gotta go with Burton's 89 Batman. I just grew up on that. Danny Elfman's score, I had that movie memorized when I was a kid. I mean, I just love that movie so much, and there is no way that I'm ever going to shake that. Then Batman Begins, and I need to name a fifth, right? You got to go with nipples at some point, right? No. I'll give The Dark Knight Rises credit where it's due. I mean, I was working projection on that for enough time that, just come out like, so you came back to die with your city. No, I came back to stop you. And, I mean, it even if you're making fun of it, it's quotable and fun. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
I guess I'd probably put the Dark Knight Rises as my fifth one, since I've been thinking about it while you guys were talking about it. It's like that's the one that gets so much praise, and I literally know people and have had long, lengthy conversations with people who hold it higher than the Dark Knight. And to me, that's just sanity, because it is so flawed. I think it is easily probably Nolan's worst film. And I mean, that's saying a lot, because he's basically hasn't made a bad film. I guess when I try to stop thinking about all my complaints about it, it's got some really solid stuff in it. So that would probably be my fifth one, I guess. But again, like we already talked about it. It's like they're all, after those first 4, they're all kind of flawed. But yeah.
Yeah, as far as ratings, I actually checked them right now, and I'm glad to be consistent. Because The Dark Knight, I have a 9, and then I gave a 9 to the original Batman, and
Cool.
And then I think the Batman I would give an 8. So it's not a bad rating. It's just not a 9. Yeah, and then I think I gave I think I gave an 8 to Batman Begins, and then the rest of them are like 7, 6, and whatever. Well, what's your ratings for the Batman?
I think I'd probably do like an 8.
I'll say an 8.7.
Okay.
Am I allowed to do that?
Oh yeah.
Sure.
Obviously, if you choose to, just to put a point on it. You don't want to give a 9, but you don't want it to be a low 8.
Yeah.
8.7.
Or a mid 8. It's a mid to high 8. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and then I think this is the point, is that it's not a bad movie by any stretch. And I agree with Matt that there's a lot going on there thematically. And Matt mentioned how I might like it because I in the past I've talked about how I want to see an adaptation of Batman that's more psychologically driven with what's going on in his mind. I don't think this is it. Like I think some of it is there, but he is not demented enough. I don't think they. But again, we can get deeper into that. Like maybe Matt will convince me otherwise. But yeah, it's good. It's a detective story, which is what Batman is. It was a detective story also in The Dark Knight. So, and this was just a very different type of approach to it, tone wise. But yeah, if it was a bit shorter, if there was more forward momentum, I don't know. Everybody's saying that there's that action scene, the car sequence, is like one of the best chases ever. Come on, it's not even remotely close to the thing with the semi and the Dark Knight. That's like
Right.
stopping like flips around and then like he comes around and like and the Joker stands there like with the gun. God,
Yeah.
it's like, come on, that stuff is magical. That's like so story driven, so spectacularly done. Like nothing in the Batman comes close to that. If you want to just visuals alone.
I completely agree with you there, and it's not just about getting pretty images on screen. It's about context. It's about performance. It's about the push and pull between the protagonist and the antagonist. It's about who the fuck is this guy who's just yelling at me? Come on and hit me, even though
Yeah.
even though Batman can't hear him saying "hit me."
Yeah.
That's one of the greatest things that I think flies under the radar of The Dark Knight. I mean, just because we can hear it, so many people assume that Batman can hear it. There is no way that Batman is hearing Joker say "hit me." There is
Yeah.
no way. No, it's no that is by and far a better action sequence with a better resolution,
Yeah.
albeit with a few plot holes. But
So I guess
yeah.
should we get into spoilers?
Yes.
Okay. I'll let you go first. You said some like some of the stuff that some people might have missed and undertones of it. Like, do you want to get into that?
Sure. I think that there is an underlying message, but again, I think it's personal. I think it's more personal than, and this is where I give it a few points, maybe over The Dark Knight, where most of the Dark Knight, I mean, even the great the great last showdown with the Joker with the two boats. Basically doing the prisoner's dilemma thing. Like we're dealing with these philosophical issues and seeing how they'll play out. And do you believe in this or do you believe in that? And it's done on such a large scale. Whereas I think that the Batman ultimately, since it's dealing with a younger Batman, I mean, obviously, he's more experienced in this Batman than Batman Begins, but it should be clear that these are not connected at all with the Nolan films. This Batman is still really figuring out what his role is. It's kind of funny. The opening monologue in the Batman, no matter how much I like it, there's no way that you can listen to that monologue and not think back to the Coon. Which is funny because the opening monologue in the Coon episode of South Park was actually inspired more from Watchmen than it was from The Dark Knight. But it's just hard to shake that, right? That they're, I'm 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 the symbol this town needs, and they think I'm lurking in the dark. I am the shadows and everything. But there's actually really something there. He's talking at the beginning of the movie about he is the shadows. Darkness and fear is a weapon. And I read into that at the beginning of the movie, and like it's this really cool opening sequence, really gorgeously shot. All this chaos going on in the streets, and they're showing you visually. I mean, over this voiceover, but like I don't think it really falls into saying it and showing it at the same time specifically. That they see the signal. Holy crap! I'm doing something that I shouldn't be doing, and there's a shadow here, and I am convinced that this guy is lurking for me. And then finally you've got the people at the end of that sequence where he really is there, and it's a haunting sequence, and it's really well done, and it's tense, and it's visually gorgeous, and the score is great, and so on and so forth. And the funny thing is, I think by the end of the movie, he realizes that his entire speech at the beginning of the movie is like, "Holy fuck, I'm the KGB." Like that. I'm always lurking in the shadows. That fear is a weapon. That you always have to be looking over your shoulders for me. Maybe there's something that I need to temper in my behavior in order to do what I actually want to do.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the strong points of the movie, that it's and maybe that's why they brought it up to modern times, where we have this justice reform of realizing that criminals are not irredeemable, that they come from some sort of motivation. Like criminals can sometimes be a bunch of idiots following another idiot online, like the character of the Riddler. It's the whole QAnon, the thing, like little undertones going on there. Um, and these are not bad people. They just are completely misguided, and they have guns. Yeah, and the fact that he's supposed to be a symbol of good, of justice, but he actually inspires the opposite. I think there's been movies where that's been done before, like where there's like that kind of backfires.
Well, I mean, The Dark Knight did that too.
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning of the movie,
But
but they mostly try to do good. They didn't try to do bad things.
well,
Like
well,
here,
well
it's
I was thinking more about like Alfred's whole speech about the Michael Caine voice about things were always going to get worse before they got better. In The Dark Knight. But I didn't mean to cut you off. But
oh no, yeah, it's
yeah.
totally fine. Yeah, but I think it's interesting what the movie is doing. It was definitely trying to be of the time and do something different, and there's definitely something thematically going on there. I still think that he's not demented enough, as far as like he should almost be as messed up as the Riddler. The Riddler is like completely gone, should be in asylum. I think Bruce Wayne should be in an asylum. It's just that he has so much money, and he's the Batman, so nobody can touch him. Like he's in this weird limbo of like, well, I'm sort of the good guy, so nobody's gonna come after me, but really I should also be in an asylum. Like none of us should be on the streets doing this vigilante thing. Like that's how bad it should be, and this is not it. Like he really seems like
Yeah.
for the most part, well composed young man who's got a plan, even though he doesn't have it all figured out, and he's still working out the details and still learning. And it'll be interesting what they do with the second movie. Like, how do you approach it and not be a symbol of fear? Like, how can you try
Yeah.
to help a city not with intimidation and power and yeah. So it's all that stuff is interesting stuff. It's just that yeah, and it was set up really, really well. I just felt like it was a bit, all of it was just a bit too much. It goes back to like the way the look of the movie was too. It was all too dark, and there's too many twists and turns, and his relationship to his father, and his father being corrupt, the fact that we're all corrupted in some ways. It's all good stuff, but I just felt like it was, all of it was just a bit uh, too much, and with not enough of a punch, like a gut punch in the end, say like it was in The Dark Knight. How did you react to it, Jason? As far as like the
Sorry, can I just come in
oh yeah, go ahead.
really quickly? Just because like the whole Batman should be fucking nuts thing. I don't recall exactly what I said to you, but I was just saying that I mean my intent was to just kind of say, in terms of like your spectrum of having a Batman who's not really mentally focused and there, and like he might be mentally focused in terms of, well, I'm going to solve this crime, but he's probably got some real shit going on down there. And uh, that this is a movie that actually pushed in that direction. I mean, I'm with you, Gil, in terms of saying, like, honestly, after the Dark Knight trilogy ended, when I was thinking about my Batman movies, I was thinking about hard R rated, like Batman is like busting people's skulls open and then Clayface comes out or something like that. Like, let's just go all full bore that way. But you're not going to get $150 million to make that movie. I wasn't saying that this was your vision of Batman. I was just saying that it was a little bit closer.
Oh, it's getting closer. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, for sure. I mean, it was different, and anything that's different will be potentially closer. But and who's to say? I'm not saying that my way is the correct way. It's just that that's the way I'm perceiving the character. Like the character is really messed up. Like this whole thing is because nobody actually has powers. These are just people. They're not superheroes, really.
Right.
They live in the real world, except for like I guess Superman's supposed to be in the same universe, but but they really have none of this should be going on, and Batman never really helps the situation. And it seems like just the fact that he's there, that's why there's supervillains, because they're a reaction to him. So all that is good because like they touch on that in this movie, that he's basically created the Riddler. So and what do you do about that? It's one of those. It's sort of like Man of Steel. It's like as long if it sets up the second movie to be something, I think they can do something very unique with the next movie, of like how does Batman, like once he realizes that he really is not doing good by just intimidating criminals. Like, so what's next? And that could be an interesting, I think, a better movie than this one. But we'll see, if they make it,
Okay.
what it's going to be.
Okay, Jason, sorry I cut you off.
It's fine. I don't know really where to start. In terms of what you were just talking about, I agree with you that in general, there's things about this movie that were just like a little too dark, and didn't need to be. Like it didn't achieve. I don't know. I don't want to get too into that. It's not really that important. But the I do feel like this is a movie that my feelings for it will hinge largely on where it goes with the next film, because I can see this as a really, really good first installment if they go in the right direction with the next movie. If they kind of double down, I think that it's going to retroactively hurt this film. I think that this movie, I think it's pretty clear, really. I mean, I love the opening monologue or the opening scene you guys discussed where you're seeing the bat signal and you're seeing the people committing crimes, seeing the bat signal, and then it's showing what effect he's had on the city in the couple of years he's been doing this, and how he's striking fear into the criminals with his actions. And that's great. But then in the very next scene, that Matt described, when Batman steps out of the shadows and he beats the crap out of a whole bunch of, like, a whole gang of people in a subway terminal and saves an innocent man who was about to get killed, he reaches for that man, and the guy is equally as terrified of Batman as he is the people who were about to kill him. And that's kind of the movie in a nutshell, is him realizing that, as Gil talked about too, yes, some of the things he's doing is kind of causing some of these other people like the Riddler to start doing things as well. But I mean, that's kind of a weird interpretation of it. Yes, I think there is some cause and effect there, but it's not like it's his fault or anything. It's just that in this movie, he realizes that being this image, this symbol of vengeance, which is what he calls himself. It's one of my other problems with the movie. That he like literally calls himself vengeance. Is very annoying, and he does it so much that the Penguin actually casually refers to him as vengeance, which is really dumb. But anyway, whatever. The point is that by the end of the movie, he realizes that he needs to simultaneously be an uplifting symbol for the rest of society, as well as being a symbol that strikes fear into into the villains. And so he needs to be more heroic and stuff, which is why it's great at the end when he is lifting people out of the the wreckage and stuff like that, and bringing people to safety. It's the only moment where he really looks heroic in the entire movie, really. If they continue on that path, and like what the mayoral candidate said to Bruce Wayne in the one or two scenes where he's actually Bruce Wayne in this movie, where she says, your parents did so much more philanthropic work than you ever do. Maybe you could really make a big difference with your money, and so on and so forth. It's so frustrating and so annoying in this movie to see Batman like not wanting to ever be Bruce Wayne. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think the Batman of the comic books actually doesn't like to be Bruce Wayne that much. I think he prefers being Batman, but that doesn't change the fact that, like, obviously there's just a part of him that needs to be present as a person, other than Batman. But I think if in the next movie we see him, the whole movie, not just him, like the movie should reflect this, the overall tone, theme, everything, the lighting, everything visually with this movie should reflect that he should be Bruce Wayne much more in the next movie, and he should learn that he can do so long as Batman is there, keeping the crime below a certain threshold in Gotham, then his influence as Bruce Wayne, as a billionaire, who's there to help with charitable things, he can do so much more with that persona than he ever could as Batman in order to help people, so long as they are in a city that's safe enough to live in. If that's where the next movie goes, and then the third movie takes it even further into another direction, that will make this into one of the greatest, like, first movies this will be a great first installment in a trilogy if that's where they end up going with it. If in the next movie it's just equally as dark and there doesn't seem to be any sort of like lesson learned or anything like that, and he's still running around calling himself Vengeance, then this movie will retroactively be worse.
Oh no! I mean, if he ever opens his mouth in the subsequent films and calls himself Vengeance, it's going to be a complete
miss.
It's going to be a complete Disney Star Wars level of clusterfuck.
Right.
So yeah, they should not do that, and I would like to believe that most of the people involved are not stupid enough to do that. I mean, Kathleen Kennedy isn't involved, so.
But yeah, I agree with you. That's my overall take, is that I really liked it. There's a whole bunch of stuff in it that really annoys me. But as a whole, it's mostly just kind of little annoying things where it's like, gosh, I wish they had done it this way instead of this way. But like, it's good. It's really good. The performances are excellent. Like almost everybody.
Yeah. No, they're good, for sure. Yeah, and
Colin Farrell's really great.
Yeah, Colin Farrell's good.
Actually, sorry, Gil, you can go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Just going to
go
make
ahead.
Okay, so actually, upon second viewing, I mean, no matter how much I love Colin Farrell in this movie, and how great the makeup was on him and how great well, I mean, I shouldn't put the makeup above the performance. I mean, he really owned the performance. He was great. He was great. And it just bothered me that that's actually a role in the movie that, I mean, you could have just lifted him out, cut the movie by like 15 pages, gotten the same information across, and it would have been the same movie.
Yeah, that's a good editing point.
I mean,
It's a
I
bit
mean,
too many characters, even though it's a good
yeah,
performance. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, really, all they got from him was, you know, the Gordon and Batman not speaking Spanish well enough to get the the Riddler's,
El, El,
you know, thing. And I mean, come on, you could have figured that out much easier. And I mean, yeah, well, then there's no reason for the Batmobile chase sequence, and that's all you got out of it, you know. So yeah, I mean, that is a glaring. It's a glaring problem just in terms of not being terse in your screenwriting and not being efficient, but you know, you got a cool action sequence out of it, and you got a cool performance out of it, and I think we all enjoyed it. And I needed to
that's
go
one of
pee
my favorite
once
scenes
during,
in that movie.
huh?
That scene you talked about where they've got the penguin there and they're kind of like interrogating him, and
Yeah,
the El Rata La Rata scene.
yeah,
That's like easily one of my favorite scenes in the movie.
yeah. No, it's a good scene. It's well performed, like across the board, and it's
Well,
really
it
cool.
also else going for it that is one of my other major frustrations with this movie. Like one of the biggest problems with this movie as a whole, really, actually, is that there's almost no levity in this movie at all. I mean, you could make a movie as dark as you want it to be, but I mean, like you can, and as serious as you want it to be, but and you can still find places to put levity in it. Compare like the Nolan trilogy as a whole to like any to the two Batman movies that came before it, which were super bright and colorful and silly and campy, and you know, I mean, were a huge turn to the very dark side of things, the very realistic side of things. And yet those movies are full of levity. They don't have jokey jokes, but like you just have like Alfred and sometimes Lucius in a room with Christian Bale's Batman, and they're just kind of like reacting the same way that we would as normal human beings to the ridiculous nature of what's happening in front of them, and it's funny. You know, they'll just get a quick little witty line in here and there, and it's funny. You know, I mean, like that's how you do it. You put levity into a movie, and it doesn't have to make it not dark. It just adds levity and lets you breathe a little bit. This movie had like none of that, like practically nothing.
Everybody and his or her mother laughed at the thumb drive moment. Like when he he had the
Oh,
thumb
Oh, thumb drive.
attached to the thumb drive. Come on.
Yeah, it was funny. That's true.
Yeah, it had a
I
little
mean, it's
bit, but
still
it's definitely
dark, but
yeah.
I'll tell you the scene that I laughed out loud so hard in this movie was because like, and I don't think it's that funny, but it's just like I said, the movie is like is so without levity throughout almost all of it. So it's like the moment when we were talking about, you get this incredible, well, very good chase sequence, incredible visuals is what I should say. Very decent chase sequence. And
yeah,
it's a little disturbing that Batman didn't even try to save any of those truckers who obviously
yeah.
died. But whatever, that's me. Um, it's an incredible. I forgive it because of the visual. The visual that follows that fireball and it's so good. But anyway, so that music is just like dun dun. It's just like so crazy. And then suddenly we've got Colin Farrell up against a big cement pillar, and they've cuffed his feet, they've shackled his feet, they've cuffed his hands in front of him, and Gordon's there, and he's being the Penguin. He's actually being this version of the Penguin, which is kind of also another problem I have, but I'll get into that later. But like he says a bunch of good lines. He's like, what is this good cop and bad cop or something like that? And then he starts like, insulting them left and right, and they're kind of like accusing him of their whole thing. They go through their whole spiel. He insults them and belittles them for not knowing the Spanish stuff, things like that. But after all of that, forget all that stuff. It's a good scene. It's a lot of great back and forth. But the greatest moment is when they ditch him, they run to their cars, and they start driving away. And he's like, what are you going to do? You're going to leave me here? And you get to see Colin Farrell as the Penguin wearing a tuxedo waddling.
Yeah.
That was hilariously funny. That was the funniest moment in this whole movie, because not only is this movie lacking levity, one of my biggest problems with this movie is it's lacking any theming with the characters, visual theming. Catwoman is barely cat-like at all. She collects cats. She wears a little thing on her head that happens to have some little pointy things that kind of give her cat ears for one scene. Batman is fine. Forget about Batman. He's just fine, but in terms of his theming. But like Penguin, we get to see his office. There's no Penguin stuff in there. There's nothing that resembles Penguin. Nothing. He's not Penguin at all, except for in that one scene. And then the Riddler is barely he's more Jigsaw from the Saw.
Yeah,
he is the Riddler. He leaves riddles, but they're not very riddle-like. I mean, he's just barely the Riddler, and it's frustrating that there's so little visual theming and character theming in this thing at all. But that moment, that was beautiful, where we got to see him just kind of, if he had done the wah, 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 that would have been even better. But he's not going to, he's no Burgess Meredith.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely the Riddler didn't need to be a Jim Carrey type of jokey,
No.
but it could have been, like, there could have been so much levity in the riddles and his masterminding of the whole thing, like some sense of humor
I
in
kind
it.
of forgive the Riddler just because I feel like one of the other best scenes in the movie is the scene with him in Arkham, when huge spoiler obviously, but when they reveal, like, when he literally says the Bruce Wayne thing, and Batman's just kind of silent there, looking at the cameras and everything, and realizing, like, oh shoot, the jig is up and all this stuff. They even kind of hinted at it like ahead of time, saying the unmasking thing and him telling Gordon maybe this whole Batman thing's about to be over. And he goes and talks to the Riddler, and for so long he's talking and talking and talking, and you think he's spilling the beans, and then he says that thing about, like, we missed him. We almost got everybody, but we missed him. And you just suddenly, you with Batman, simultaneously take this deep breath and just go, oh my God, he doesn't know. He thinks he knew, but he doesn't know. Like, and then following that up, when Batman calls him a crazy lunatic, Paul Dano, right? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's some of the best Paul Dano I've seen in a while, because Paul Dano kind of goes all over the place. He's got great, and he's got kind of mediocre, and he's got great, but whatever. But like when he just gets up and just starts going, no, like, I really forgive a lot of his character in that performance, in that scene. I like that scene a lot, just because it just carries so much weight. It's just like, yes, it's the whole, like, linchpin of the movie right here.
It kind of reminded me of it's funny because I just saw it this evening, I think, on YouTube with my kids, but it's the scene in the Batman Lego movie where the Joker, like, is telling him, like, I'm your favorite, like, bad guy, like, a top bad guy, and he's like, you are nothing to me. I don't do ships. I don't do the relationships. And like the Joker is just like feels dumped in that moment. That it's like not mutual.
Underrated movie. That's a good movie.
Yeah, no, it's super very funny for sure. That movie, but that's the thing. I think in satirizing the character, I think they hit on a lot of truths about the villains and Batman. Like that's the kind of stuff that you need to bring it to these serious movies, but just do it toned down so it's not completely absurd. But that's that level of absurdity that needs to be here. And one other thing I was going to say about the Dark Knight, as far as humor, the Joker, as demented as he was funny. Like, he wasn't funny all the time, but there's those moments like the when he makes the pencil disappear.
Yeah.
Great scene.
And he's got the whole thing of like, well, when he walks into the room, he's like, ha 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 ha, like he does the whole like weird laughing thing that keeps on going and going forever. It's like,
It's so great.
yeah, it's just a stellar performance. I mean, as much as people say that, the Joaquin Phoenix thing was interesting in its own way, I really feel like for a comic book movie, yeah, and people have been saying it for a while now. I do think that it's probably the greatest portrayal of a villain in a movie ever. Like, top Darth Vader. I never even understood why Darth Vader was that. Like, everybody's making a fuss now because he's back in the Kenobi show, but it's like, so what? He's just like a suit with a helmet. Like, to me, actually, the Emperor was always much scarier when I was a kid than Darth Vader. But something about the Joker is just so demented, but humorous and so chaotic. I don't think there's been a villain, and maybe Sugar and No Country. Those are like probably like top two villains.
Yeah. Yeah, but Heath Ledger just did something with that it is. I really do not envy Barry Keoghan if they keep going with his Joker role in this new series, trying to step into those shoes. But I mean, everybody said the same thing about Jack Nicholson, but Barry Keoghan is 7 years younger than I am, and I mean, you think about the fact that the brief allusion to the Joker is played by the kid from Dunkirk. That's a huge step.
Yeah.
But you never know. Like the way it was with Heath Ledger, a lot of people were very surprised by it and thought it wasn't the right fit. So
Oh, I thought it was a terrible decision.
yeah, so you really just never know. And yes, like just like this movie, he's might not top the Joker performance, just like Joaquin didn't. But that's why it's important to just focus on doing your own thing. I think that's what Matt Reeves did with this movie. I think that's what Joaquin Phoenix did with his portrayal. Like, that's really all you can do, and hope that people appreciate it for what it is. Like, obviously the Heath Ledger performance was not the Jack Nicholson one. It's iconic in its own way, but if I have to just objectively say which was the better villain in a movie, it's the Dark Knight one. But it's not to say that the Nicholson performance wasn't iconic. It was still a very good performance.
Yeah, it's just that I mean, I think that we're also dealing, especially at some point, we're dealing with different eras. We're dealing with different tastes. We're dealing with, I mean, the Jack Nicholson Joker is iconic in part because it's timeless, but also in part because it was late 80s. I think that the Joaquin Phoenix performance is, I don't know. I don't know if the Joaquin Phoenix is going to go down as iconic. It is really good. Like, don't get me wrong. He knocked that out of the fucking park. And he deserved that Oscar. I just wish he didn't give that fucking speech.
By the way, I think just today I saw a post on Facebook or something that they announced the second
yeah,
one,
that's really, yeah.
second Joker. So.
Lame.
Jason's got some problems with that movie.
Yeah, that movie seemed pretty self-contained, and I mean, and if that's true, then DC is going polar opposite from MCU, and like, hey, we tried to integrate everything just like the MCU did so successfully, and we failed. So how about this? How about we'll have a Joker over here and a Joker over there? and we'll just like let everybody know that these are two entirely different Jokers in two entirely different universes.
But that's the thing. I actually like that a lot, and maybe Jason could respond to this because he's a big MCU fan. But that makes so much sense. Oh, you're a big comic book fan. Sorry. But basically, even though there's some differences between MCU movies, it's the movies. It's not TV. These are supposed to be standalone trilogies or standalone movies that are in the superhero comic book, like inspired by. But that way, what DC is doing is, if you want the Taxi Driver version of the Joker, you watch that movie. If you want the if you want the comic book superhero version of it, you watch. Hopefully, if the Joker shows up on the Batman movie, it's catering to everybody, and it's saying like, we're not gonna make the second Joker for $200 million, but like it'll be made for $80 million, $70 million, and it'll probably make the money back because even though it won't be an action movie, it'll be an interesting exploration of the psychology of these characters, and it will cater more towards, a more adult audience, maybe movie buffs that are just a bit no longer into the action scene every 10 minutes. It's just catering to everybody, whereas the MCU is like, no, it's just one thing. It's always going to be action oriented. There's always going to be humor. It's always going to be brightly lit. And we're not going to deviate by that too much because we know our audience. It's like a TV show. Like, you'll bring other DPs and other directors, but it's all pretty much going to look the same because it needs to look like another episode in the show. Like, you can't deviate too much from it because we've built an audience for it. So, I like the Warner Brothers DC approach because then it's more of a menu. And everybody gets to pick whichever movies they want to watch, and they don't have to be forced into 36 movies because they don't have context if they haven't seen every single one of them.
I mean, I was more saying that I'm excited to see how this plays out rather than taking a hard line. But I've really hated what the MCU has been doing for very many years. I mean, I've really hated what Disney has been doing for the last several years. But I mean, maybe DC will come in and disrupt the market, and that'll make things better. You never know.
It's all gonna be just content out there, and people will watch whatever they want to watch. Yes, I guess, was there anything else we needed to say about the movie? Because I think we kind of veered off in a different direction.
Let me just throw out a few really stupid things here, but like just because I talked about a lot of the stuff I loved, and I agree with Matt that the Batmobile looks really awesome. I hope that in the next one it's got a few more fun things that they can do for another car chase or something like that. But a few just negative things, and I'm just going to spit all this out there because it's not really whatever. But I don't know why they would expect anybody to believe that after the bombing scene they would wait at all to unmask Batman. I think that a paramedic would just see it as necessary thing to do to pull that mask off of him just for health reasons. But whatever. That's just kind of nitpicking.
Yeah.
But especially when we're talking about something like this, like Batman, another good comparison would be like Spider-Man, maybe to a lesser extent, Superman, but where we have decades of movies and multiple installments that have been tried over time, it feels weird when you see a new one come out and you see them backpedal, like you see them take a bad step, because you kind of feel like, hey, we figured that out already. All you have to do is work off of what your previous predecessors have done and do it right the way they did, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's really odd that this movie doesn't have Lucius in it. In the comic books, Bruce Wayne has a guy named Lucius Fox, who's a black guy who runs like almost like a CEO type guy who runs Wayne Enterprises. It makes perfect sense. Bruce Wayne is spending most of his nights as Batman, his days sleeping and as Bruce Wayne. he does not have time to also be like the CEO of a major company. Like you got to have somebody running that stuff. That's what Lucius does, and he's a great character, and he's an important character in that sense because it brings a lot of realism, to the story. And in the Nolan trilogy, that was the first time they brought that character, from the comics into into a live action, thing. That makes sense, And now in a world that we're in now, where we're trying to change the race of as many different characters as possible to force diversity into these films, it's like, why do you not have Lucius Fox in this movie? We've got Alfred.
Gordy's black now.
That's my whole point. You don't need to change his race. Anyway, whatever. I don't. And by the way, what's his name? Jeffrey Wright was awesome in this movie.
Yes.
But
yes, he was.
My point is, here's a character that is in the comic books, is a minority character, is a great character, and is a character that actually has a very important part in creating a realistic feel to this movie, because it's like, Alfred is doing his thing and assisting Batman and all this stuff like that. It's not like he has time to run Wayne Enterprises either. This is a slam dunk character. You've got to put this character in there, and it's so dumb that he's not in it.
Especially in a 3-hour movie.
In a 3-hour movie, yes. And so that's annoying to me. But then also on a whole nother thing, what on earth? I don't know what the hell they were thinking with the stupid contact lens camera. I mean, what century is this supposed to be taking place in? When Val Kilmer's Batman back in what is that, 95, 96, something like that, whatever that was, when that movie came, I think it was 95. When Batman Forever came out, it was more realistic then that you could create a suit with echolocation in the Batman cowl, in 95 than it is today to think that you could have a camera in a contact lens that's transparent, wireless, and broadcasting a signal to somebody through a building miles away or whatever, a block away even, or whatever. And then the audacity that this thing somehow has the battery life to be running days later when she needs to signal him, and she puts a sign in front of it in her apartment so he can read the sign. What are we doing? This isn't like Star Trek or something.
That's actually strangely a good point that I overlooked.
I mean, so a good friend of mine mentioned that they probably did that because there's kind of a theme in this movie about first person point of view kind of thing and watching people.
Yeah.
Which is very true, and it's very present. You see it be you see the kind of comparison they do with the Riddler watching people from across the street, Batman watching people from across the street, lots of binocular scenes, lots of stuff like that. And I love all that. It's very well done and very good, but just give me a sense of realism here. She's in a dark nightclub where it's loud and obnoxious and whatever, and he's got this cool bat suit, and they kind of wanted to do whatever they could to make it different from the previous Batman. If you want to do this, give him a little camera that's the size of a little thimble or something, like a little 1-inch cylinder that's really tiny, like the size of a little AAA battery that's mounted on his little cowl next to his eye or something. Give him something like that he uses to replay his, he replays his little crime scene investigation to himself in the Batcave. If he needs to give her something, he gives her the little earphones, which makes sense because we have that technology. But then, she's got stuff she's putting on her ear. Give her an earring or something that's the size of a pea. At least give it some sort of 3 dimension to it that we can kind of go, it's plausible. I believe it. Whatever. A contact lens? A contact lens? I'm sorry, but no. Just no. No way. Nah. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
I mean, this does not hurt the movie in any way, shape, or form. Just felt like throwing it out there.
No. Well, I mean, it hurts it. It hurts it in the way that you actually needed to. Yeah.
No,
Well,
no,
but
that
see,
absolutely-
to me, that's the equivalent of like having a murder scene with like zero lights.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
it's just
that's a good point, actually. That if there's one scene in this movie where it's going to be like really well lit, it would be when the cops have shown up and are trying to find clues.
yeah, exactly. It's like what people used to say about a house or ER. It's like what the fuck is wrong with the lighting in these hospitals? Like that it's so dark. You know, a hospital is supposed to be very brightly lit, but but
Did House
obviously
have
it's
a
a
lot of dark
drama.
scenes? I guess there were. I'm trying to think of all the scenes I've seen in House. I guess there were a few scenes that were kind of pretty dark, huh?
I mean, even is not that dramatically lit, but yes, it's not as fluorescent likely lit as it should be. Like, for example, some newsrooms in some movies will be pretty brightly lit because that's what newsroom looks like. So they don't overly dramatize the lighting there just to make it seem realistic. So yeah, I think they went a bit overboard. I think it was a bit too one tone
Yeah.
for me with the tone of the movie and the lighting and hopefully like we said maybe in the next movie there's going to be more of a balance between dark and light that maybe he realizes he's not only a vengeance or a dark knight, he shouldn't be vengeance at all, um, that he should be a white knight just like the Two-Face was and the Dark Knight. That like
so
he's supposed to be a white knight by day, Bruce Wayne, and a dark knight by night. That would be an interesting movie, and trying to find that balance.
so if I just may interject about the lighting complaints and everything. First of all, I think this movie looked fucking fantastic.
It's a bit too dark, but it was
It's-
borderline The Godfather. Like they
yeah,
went full Godfather there. Like
yeah.
but not nearly as good. I mean,
So
I like Greg Fraser and everything. I'm just saying.
I don't know. Maybe if some crime scene investigator listens to this at some point, or we have somebody in our friend lists, or somebody who goes into murder scenes where they're taking, uh, photographs of the scene. I mean, to my recollection, they were using flash, right, when they were photographing the wounds and everything.
Probably.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, are we supposed to believe that they would risk contaminating the scene by bringing in a bunch of work lights?
No,
And
it's not that. But I'm just
I
saying
mean,
that
like,
overall, that movies are supposed to have, it's a roller coaster visually, pacing wise. And I felt like this was one note, always dark, except for the one
yeah,
scene that was during the day, the funeral, which was also kind of dark, especially once they got into the church. It was a bit too one note for me. So
yeah.
that's the only thing I would say
I
about it.
I can agree with you on that. I mean, I mean, really, from that perspective, it's kind of actually darker than Seven and
It
a
is,
few of
yeah.
those
Just gonna
other
bring that up.
movies.
And before
Because
I forget, by the way, the Godfather, there's also I got a hint of the music being very similar to the Godfather too. I don't know if you
really,
noticed that. Like some of the themes, like kind of sounded like yeah the same score. But
well,
yeah,
you
I don't
have
know.
a much better ear than I do. But yeah, all right.
I don't think this hurts the movie in any way, but I just thought it was worth mentioning. I, they're going for a very different Batman with this movie, but I don't think there's any question when you see them, especially outside of the bat suit, when you see them walking around and everything. I mean, I think Christian Bale or Michael Keaton would kick the crap out of this Batman.
Okay,
I'm just
that's well taken. Especially I think it definitely showed in the Dark Knight how he got to where he was, like the amount of shit he goes through in Batman Begins to be as skillful as he is. Yeah, you definitely buy it in the Dark Knight that he's very skillful with that history.
yeah.
Yeah.
And Affleck has a workout scene in his movie that's half his.
Cool. Well, I guess we'll see what happens with the next one. Hopefully it's a good one. I mean, we're giving this movie a bit of a hard time, but we still gave it an 8, all of us, so not close to a
I think
9.
as long as they go in the right direction, this movie will be remembered by me, at least, as being very good. I would love to see the third one go even further and like really piss off a bunch of fans. You know, there's this like huge following of people who love Zack Snyder for how, I'm doing air quotes right now, dark and gritty his his Batman and his Superman are. And it's like they all loved this movie because it was, air quotes, dark and gritty, and I would just love to see them all feel so like completely abandoned when his next movie gets lighter, and then when the next one beyond that even gets even more lighter, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully that's what they're going for, and hopefully they'll still surprise us.
I would love to see like a psychological journey that this Batman goes on, and then like actually somehow find some magical way for them to like justify him actually having a Robin, which would just be a weird thing to see in this universe they've created, but it'd be kind of cool to see that journey.
Yeah, because ultimately Batman, I mean, originally was fairly campy. So,
well,
yeah.
I love the Adam West ones.
Yeah, I love those. I mean, obviously that would be too much now, but
we don't want to go that far. Not that far.
but you see, totally, the Batman Lego movie. I'm telling you, there's gonna be at some point a live action version that's gonna be somewhere between the Adam West and what this is. At some point, somebody's gonna do that.
That movie's so great.